All right. Hi, everyone. James is here to discuss looking up his family history and how it was a real adventure and helped him heal in his life.
Yeah, I just made a video on the strength of the questions that were coming out on this Zoom meeting. Seems to be a lot of doubts and fears about this Phoenix event and where should we go and that. So I thought I need to address that and nip that one in the bud, because collective energy, it's a very powerful thing. So let's change it a bit so it's a little bit more positive and not fearful and doubtful. I suppose, yeah, I need to really go back to 1994. I'd never heard of Reiki, and I had an introduction to that, and did the first degree of Reiki, and the tutor said at the end of it that you're a natural at this, but you'll go on to combine it with something else. And I thought, So I spent quite a few years after that looking for that something else. So moving 10 years forward, we come to family history. And it became quite apparent early on with that there's a lot of family trees on various sort of ancestral sites that are basically copying what other people have put up, and it creates these urban myths which in time become reality. And it gets to the point where you get somebody send you an email saying, I think you've got your tree wrong. And I said, well, no, the reason what it's showing is because there was no formal adoption procedure. I'm looking at this in historical context. And I've backed this up with a paper trail. But the 12 years I spent, actually it's 13 years I spent immersed in family history, was intuition led the whole way. It was almost like there was an invisible force that was guiding me to sort of look at certain books, and I'd stumble across references to ancestors on this Brockhurst line that weren't mentioned in the index to the book, but they were basically yeoman class farmers, which is one down from the sort of landed gentry. Probably got that position from being sort of loyal to one of the gentry and was sort of given the lands. They seem to be possibly French or Saxon in origin. And I just followed hunches that took me to various records offices, but it became far more than just family history, as in the sense of sitting in an armchair at a laptop, looking at the screen and joining a various sort of websites and things, which is perfectly fine. But it's like I need to see the original documents as much as possible. And even that, when you hold a marriage register from 1754 onwards, it is your ancestor that is making that mark or signing their name. It's a beautiful feeling of closeness, ancestral energy, basically. So I widened it up right out to transcribing entire registers of baptisms, marriages, and burials for various parishes, and even going around to mapping out, photographing and recording 15 churchyards and gleaning information from those, tying it up with what it shows in the burial register, and the headstones open up an awful lot more information depending on what's inscribed on them. But that's only accounting for something like 2% of the population. But it also becomes apparent how we're all interconnected, and how different surnames join into other surnames where these families. You've got two branches going on. If you look back from yourself and you go to parents, grandparents, and this doubling effect through generations, you've got an inverted pyramid. But then if you see it from the perspective of, say, 6 generations back and bring that forward, you've got an upright pyramid from that one ancestor, that then you've got many branches from that. And of course, this replicates and overlaps and forms a flower of life pattern. It was a beautiful experience. And I remember it was from about 2009. I thought I really need to start looking into this properly and looking at as many original documents, getting a feel for the area. There was one particular day, I think it was in the July of 2009, beautiful clear blue skies, and I'd got to a point where I could have just carried on just looking basically for needles in a haystack. I'd widened it out where I wasn't looking for a specific individual. I was looking across a region, because of course they move parish to parish sometimes as well. So you may not find the next generation in that same register. It may be in one of the neighboring ones. So I thought I need to look at the landscape as well. I need to go and see what my ancestors saw, because that hasn't changed. It's basically still the same. And I stumbled across an old churchyard, and I can assure you they're very much alive. It was 80 headstones. The church was pulled down in 1875, but the energy is one of tranquility and peace. But it's amazing the vibrations and things that I was picking up. Some of them were very terrified of petrol lawnmower, because I started restoring this churchyard. And then I also found out of it how little clout the Anglican Church has, because it's landlocked, and it's like, well, I don't want a public right of way, but there are living descendants of these people in this churchyard who surely have a right to go and visit their ancestors' memorials. But slight sort of difference of opinion on that one. But it was a beautiful stepping stone. I never realized how much that would come into this. And in some ways, I've got like a 10-year marker, 1994, 2004. It ended up with holding annual meetings with very distant cousins, off a sort of chance remark of saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all get together? And it's like, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Let's see if we can do this. So I found a pub with a function room right nearby where this churchyard is. And the first year, 15, basically strangers, but blood related, 5, 6 generations, 7 generations back that I'd never met. And it's like almost like an instant recognition of the avatar. There's definitely an energy that they're strangers and yet they're not. So that's a magical moment as well that comes out. Sadly, then most of them don't seem to be on their spiritual journey at anywhere near the level that would benefit them, shall we say. So I've sort of lost contact, really. But it was a stepping stone, and this journey is all about letting go as well, not having attachment. So I can't feel attachment to the past, but I can acknowledge the past at the same time. And it has been a beautiful teacher. I mean, with what you said before, Julie, your life has brought you to now. The events at the time might have seemed very horrific, but they're closed chapters, and it brings us all to this moment. One of the things that was coming out about this Phoenix event in 2040, just under 18 years away. Well, this is where you play the part of Zechariah, which means God looks back. Look back to 18 years ago. Where were you on your spiritual journey then? Did you even imagine you would be where you are today? Did you have any conception of what you would get, the experiences you would go through over those following 18 years. So now consider what the next 18 years will bring. And don't fall for the assumption that the environment is going to be the same. We will be very different beings in 18 years' time. Hopefully far more in a much clearer dialogue with our intuition, which will guide us, where we should be at any given moment. This is what it is all about. It is being aware of that communication from your avatar. What is it telling you? Why have you got a particular ache or a pain there? It's trying to tell you something. It's not something to take a painkiller and ignore and turn a blind eye to it. That is something to, okay, I've got an ache. Why have I got an ache? Is it something I've created in my mind? Because we have this power of creation, and we are all past masters at creating things we don't want. But what about creating the things that we do want? Sorry, Julie, are you there?
Exactly, because like I always say, you're manifesting reality whether you know it or not. So you might as well manifest the reality that you want.
This is exactly it. So we're basically magnetic. So if you've got doubts and fears, you're looking back to your old you're playing the part of Lot's wife in the biblical story. And it's important to, once you start on this journey, there's no looking back. There is no turning back. As Jason says on Archaics, once the mind is stretched, it can't go back. It's a beautiful thing.
Wendell Holmes said that first. But
Sorry?
yeah, Jason quotes that a lot.
Yeah, it's a very, very true saying. This realm is all about having experiences. But of course, you can alter what you experience by what you put out. So if you have feelings of want, that will respond to you with more want. It doesn't hear in the same language. It doesn't speak English. It speaks in feeling. It is direct, unseen communication. It's far superior to Wi-Fi. It's a much broader band. And it does not suffer from artificial glitches or material glitches. It is not man-made from our perception. Whether the grand architect of this realm is just a computer programmer, and whether that computer programmer is basing it like computer games in this reality are often based on Earth, with trees and woods and things in these tank games and castles and sort of Game of Thrones type scenarios. So you've got a basis of this reality in a two-dimensional form on a computer game screen. This, by extension, is another version of that. It is an organic carbon copy of another real Earth. It's a planet in which we learn to grow. We are co-creators. We are supposed to be learning to cooperate, to operate in a cohesive way that is mutually beneficial. Because I think it's fair to say that the structure of the control mechanism is not doing a particularly good job and not doing something that is benefiting everybody. It seems to be benefiting a very select few in a very material way. And it causes me a problem. And it causes me a problem when I hear doubts and fears about the Phoenix event. This is something to embrace. It's being shown as the Game of Thrones, the fire will reign, the rise of the dragon. The fire it's just a message to embrace that internal fire inside yourself. to find that lion. I just posted up on Facebook. I sort of thought I've got to share this. I saw it on a post, and it was Nebula Carina. And I said, before anybody says it's fake, it's CGI, that is totally irrelevant. Yes, you can see multiple faces. You can see legions in it of various characters. But in this realm, everything comes out backwards. So it's reverse speech. So Nebula is all be in, it's all be in, all in arc. The arc is in your mind. You have all those characters. You create them in the mind. You can play the part of David against Goliath. It's the monsters that you feed through fear, those restrictions you place upon yourself. And they become bigger and bigger the more attention you give to them, the more tension that you will feel. And it's like, oh, I mean, you could take it to the extreme level of I'm never crossing a road again because I'm frightened that I might get hit by a car. And then where would we be? But when we cross a road, we look both ways. So we look forwards, we look backwards with language lessons of the heart. We can apply the blueprint that Jason has shown with a 138-year cycle. You can make an isometric marker right now, and you can say, I'm drawing a line in that metaphorical sand. It ends here. The day starts now. I'm newly creating myself. I'm taking that first step. And of course, then it is about creating time and space to do that inner work and face those demons inside yourself. But oh boy, it's a wonderful thing to do. I can't say I've completed it. And I don't want to complete it really, because I'm enjoying the taking part in it. And I love being afforded this position where I can share this. This is just beautiful.
Right. There's so much magic or whatever you want to call it, miracles
Yeah,
to uh, to be had, and yeah, we really are gods in our own right as far as it comes to creating, and especially this reality. So it's time we start acting like the magical beings that we are.
yeah. I got sent a message with a picture of a hand with a very tiny, small white feather, and it's like, well, there's the first baby step. This person has he's used his imagination. He's found a feather in the most unlikely place, and you have to wonder where these things come from. And the fact it's a tiny little white feather implies that it's in infancy and it's pure because it's white. That's a beautiful message to get. That is something. Well, I've got a huge collection of feathers here. I've definitely managed this one. If you look for them, you won't find them. But if you imagine them, if you imagine finding one, you can use your existing scene. Like if you take a regular route to work, or like with the walking the dogs. I forget the lady's name who I suggested this to. It's like, well, you've already got the scene. You haven't got to worry about creating the back scene. That's there. All you've now got to create is imagination of seeing that feather and picking it up, holding it in your hand, imagining what it would feel like, and imagining that it is already happened. And you just go out there, something will just grab your attention. You'll just see it. And it's like, oh, there's the feather. That is a beautiful experience. And it's so simple, and it costs nothing to do apart from putting a little bit of creative imagination into it. That's the first step. You could do a golf ball or a tennis ball. You could climb a ladder.
Right.
Anything.
So what you're saying is people should just have an intention to find a
Yep.
random object like a feather or a golf ball or a certain colored rock or whatever. Just set that intention and then forget about it, and then all of a sudden it'll manifest one day in the probably most peculiar way, perhaps.
Yes, often is. And it's always when we're not looking for it and when we're not expecting it, because this is something coming from the unseen that is now coming in into the material. I don't know how it works. I don't want to know how it works. I can appreciate that it does work. That's good enough for me. I don't want to pull it apart. I might not be able to put it back together right, and then it won't work properly. It's a little bit like I'm going to deconstruct a car engine, but I'm not going to have a plan of how to put it back together. And then maybe I put it back together and there's 3 bolts left over. And it's like, where should they have gone? So I'm going to create something imperfect from something that was working perfectly fine. And if it ain't broken, don't try and fix it.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
These sayings we've got in this reality, it's like language lessons of the heart, manifestation. If you don't succeed, try again. Try. You put mind, body, and soul into it. The more feeling you put into it, if you look at the external facts of all your 5 senses are telling you you don't have that feather. Now you turn those senses inward and you convince and impress upon yourself that you do have that feather. The subconscious cannot tell the difference. It creates chemical changes in the body. It changes the balance of the body. We radiate out from the heart because hopefully it's all coming from the heart center, the center of us, the center of the chakra system. And just, you can just appreciate that it does. The time scale is going to be, it's take personal responsibility. I didn't put enough feeling. I didn't put enough thought into it. So, but I've learned that I need to put a little bit more into it. So I will try again. How do we learn the 12 times table? Is that not through repetition?
So true. Repetition is key. Because even if
And
you learn something, if you don't repeat it over and over again, you're not going to be very good at it.
notice with the 12 times table, we end up at 144. Now, is that just coincidence? Because I make 1, 4, and 4 to add up to 9, which is the completion of man. You've completed memorizing and impressing through repetition to be able to now do the 12 times table. It's a very useful thing in this reality. It's a beautiful thing when you see what this reality is showing you. It's not actually evil. It's showing you how you can learn. When you use your intuition, you are your own student and your own teacher all in one, because the student responds to how good the teacher is. So if we don't listen to our gut feeling, we can go down a wrong route quite easily, and we can fall off. But again, like learning to walk, you just pick yourself up, you dust yourself down and think, okay, I've learned to watch for that crack in that pavement, or uneven flagstone. I remember that's there. I've learned that experience. I don't want to raise my knee again if it comes to that. And you just keep going, and it becomes second nature. That's all it is. It is so simple to do, and yet looks so complex, because we are programmed into what's possible and what's not possible. This is completely saying the opposite. It's saying it is possible if you put enough feeling into it. If you convince yourself enough, it becomes real. There's your ever loving God that will just keep giving, because it communicates in feeling.
Absolutely.
Before the days of social media, if we want to look at it in a historical context, you've got this guy, Paul. He's doing the equivalent of sending out emails, or the equivalent of a YouTube channel, and he's writing letters to, funny enough, to all Greeks and Romans. And he says, Do you not realize you are gods? Do you not realize that Christ is within you? It's your intuition, it is your gut feeling, it is the solar plexus, the place of the sun. It is your own sun that you give birth to in the mind. With that Kundalini rising, that sun rises. It is the power and the wisdom. It wakes the creator which has fallen asleep in the dream. That's the object of this game in this computer program, is to remember that we are in a bodysuit avatar, basically, to experience this. It's not just a headset. It's actually sort of like a crystal of consciousness. It looks like a star with lots of prongs coming out of it. That symbol's been used a lot in the last 2.5 years. But it is that seventh chakra. It is a crown. If you think of the Latin word for crown, the system is guiding, but it's doing it through a very distorted veil. So it's coming out distorted. It's like those mirrors in the crazy house. This is a crazy house, and people are getting transfixed by those mirrors and thinking that's what they are, where they've been stretched and squashed and all sorts of weird shapes, and that's not really what you look like. You are not that thing in the mirror.
Yeah, that's a hard one to get past.
It gets easier. Again, it's with practice. And it's an amazing thing to do when you can get to the point where you can stand back from yourself and you sort of shift back in your head. So you're now like sitting there looking at yourself. You're observing your thoughts. I had this toothache where even the gum was so sensitive I couldn't even touch it. And it's like, how am I even withstanding this pain? But I detached myself from it and became aware that they're just nerve endings sending a signal. The brain doesn't feel pain. It interprets those signals as pain. It's like a fire alarm system of the body, basically. It's nothing to be feared. It's just telling you there's something wrong with the avatar. It's something that needs to be addressed. It's not something to turn your back on and ignore. And it's no different. That's just a physical expression of what we're talking about with the spiritual and the facing your shadow self. A shadow can't do anything. It is not the thing, as Ken Wheeler says. It is the absence of light. That shadow can't move until you move, if it's your own shadow. It has no life of its own. It's just it's a thing that's devoid of light, that just copies and imitates. But people become frightened of those shadows and they turn them into something that they're not. I mean, what's just happened with a repeat of history, a long reigning female monarch, a jubilee, and then 3 years later, she dies and is succeeded by a rather elderly Prince of Wales, who, shall we say, there's an assumption or an opinion that there is a very dubious background. This time round, it was a jubilee, and 3 months later, you have an elderly Prince of Wales. So, are we seeing shortening of days, 36 months down to 3? Or is it just we're removing the 6? That's a reference to the third eye, the 6th chakra, I would say. That's the perspective I see it from, anyway. But I'm quite happy to observe the theatre show and let it play out, because I know it's not going to harm me, and it's certainly not going to affect me unless I let it. If I allow it to affect me, well, it will. Balance and boundaries, the real B&B. It's not bed and breakfast. Well, it is bed and breakfast because you are feeding yourself and you are resting. You're finding the balance in yourself. You are creating a new world order within oneself that is not feeling fear and chaos. It is not in fight or flight mode. It is resting in that balance. Now it is feeding itself from its own intuition, the power of the sun, from the solar plexus. The gut feeling is the God feeling. Gut is Gott in German is God. Just different expressions of it, exactly the same thing. This is the esoteric. This is the internal. The eso, so it's the energy, spirit, inorganic. It's an organic suit. The exoteric is the energy exchanged or crossed in the organic, the external world. And it's very crossed what is presented. It's distorted, but it still has that beautiful message to be found in it. It's just perspective. But from what I see, the script writers could do a lot better. The acting is piss poor and it's not believable. I'm not convinced. If it was a painting by Leonardo da Vinci, I would see that the Leon, the lion, the L is now on and Ra will do. And it's a Da Vinci. It's of 5 senses that are now internal, not an external 5 senses that are presenting a computer screen game at me. But I'm a character in that game. And I'm in control of the joystick of that character. I'm not taking the script and the computer program as it is. That has been something I would say as far back as I remember, but I can't say that in all honesty, because I can, as far back as I remember, is something more like what most people's perception of a paradise is, which is like a tropical rainforest in a botanical gardens, where there is life, there is lush green, there is abundance. You just basically hold out your hand and something like a mango will be given to you, a windfall, freely given from nature. Imagine when we can communicate with nature and say, I'm feeling a little bit dehydrated. May I have one of your fruit? And that tree will respond and say, certainly, because we co-create, we work with nature when we're in that reality. That's the reality we had. That's the reality that has been denied us through trickery and having to play this game. But the game is coming to an end. We're in the 13th and final background of 144,000 days on that Mayan countdown calendar. But that's what it is. They're countdown calendars to various points. But of course, like everything else, that was done as a fear thing, same as when the computers reset to 00 when it got to the end of 1999. And it's like, oh, here we go again, another end of the world.
Yeah, I've been around for a lot of end of the world so far.
Yeah. And you
Yeah,
survived.
kind of like it during video games when I don't really know a lot about video games, but I just remember seeing if you just put in a video game or the ones they used to have out at arcades or whatever, and it'll kind of show you how the game is played and show the little character going through the motions and possibilities of what it can do. And so many people just stay there. They never actually pick up the joystick and start playing it, the character that they are. They just watch that little character show them how the game's played and just follow along with that instead of, taking over and playing on their own.
It's incredible how brilliant this whole thing is. But the fact it looks so complex, it's like, why would there need to be something so complex? That must be telling me something. So I need to turn the question around and look at this from a different perspective. It's like, well, all this is being done. The very implication from that is there's something inside me and inside everybody, or anybody else human, they don't want you to find. And that power of the mind, that power to create, is a phenomenal thing, but it's firewalled off for a very good reason. Because while there is system programming, what world would we create if we allow our emotions to run wild and we're not captain of our vessels? What if rage decides to have a mutiny on the vessel and take over? I think we've all seen that happen where it comes out expressed as anger in the physical world. That's not being in control of the emotions. That's being triggered by words. But words clearly do have power. Just look at the way people react. And it's at very subtle levels of sectarianism. This belief is right and your one's wrong, and I need to cling to that identity because everybody's looking to be on the winning side, but they're doing it trying to take a shortcut. You're only going to get a concept of something which may not be right. The way to prove that it's right is to experience it. If you feel something is right, then try it. If you feel drawn to something, listen to your intuition, what it's saying to you. That's the key part of this. It doesn't matter what the external world presents. You may be the only person in the world. And I know this feeling, and I think I speak for a lot of people out there. And it's like, shall we say, thank God for the internet, as it were, because imagine how we would feel if we were feeling how we feel now, but not able to talk to anybody else and thinking, am I crazy? Why am I the only one feeling like this? But clearly we're not. And there's always been that feeling of something ain't right. Something's off with this reality. There's a distortion. I can sort of see the sense of what I'm being taught. But then when I look at the outside world, what I've been taught is at odds with the way it's operating. And it's like, hold on a minute. This doesn't add up at all. This doesn't make any sense at all. And then, of course, you start going down that route of looking externally of yourself because you're taught and convinced to look outside yourself for answers. When all the time it's always the last place you look, isn't it?
Every time.
It's all about remembering, not in the sense as such of trying to remember every little detail of your past. It's remembering, as in think of the body as that's your member. Now the squiggly bits, as I call them, up top, the heavens, you're rerouting those, you're reconfiguring, you're creating new neural pathways by how you think. So you are remembering, you're reorganizing your internal structure. These avatars will just keep renewing every 18 months. Every cell renews. It's never staying the same. It's just we've got this very slow time interval thing that you can't really see the changes unless you have a long time period of say 5 years and then see the person again and they will have looked to have aged a little bit. Just compare a 2-year-old with a grandparent. Is that the same being? But the one will become the other in time. It will generally resemble that grandparent, may not look identical, but the general features will look the same. The physiology will look the same. And even there's an isometric marker being shown. There's a thing called terrible twos. Some elderly people go through a version of terrible twos and become very strong-willed and And I've seen them where they'll like launch a Zimmer frame across the room playing Skittles with somebody else in a home. And that's like really sort of terrible two type behavior coming out again. And then they go further into that baby status where they can't feed themselves if they've got dementia when it's at an advanced stage. So you've got an isometric marker of the lifespan being shown. That obviously is an artificially induced one. I won't say in the methods used because it'll probably fall sort of foul of YouTube terms and conditions. But everything in this realm is subject to terms and conditions. The terms are time, the conditions are the limitations you put on yourself from what you can imagine.
Right? If you can imagine it, you can have it. And even if you can't imagine it, you can just
Yeah. I was going right back to the churchyard. I had some very strange experiences in that churchyard. You can feel the presence of those people. And when I was through the research, I found a will of, that would be my sixth great grandfather, who passed in 1802. And in his will, it mentions about, I leave, I can't remember the item, whatever item it was, to my friend John Broadbridge, another farmer. So I sort of adopted the entire churchyard. I got this newfound family because I thought my ancestor in a settlement of only 35 households, and he's got strips of land all over this parish. So he'd have been up and down on one of his horses and carts because there's an inventory of all his possessions at one point as well. And it's building up this wonderful picture. And I thought, these people probably laughed and joked together. They probably ate together. They probably worked together. And it's like, I'm getting a feeling for everybody else here, and even the ones that aren't even marked. And one day I sat down in this churchyard. I'd been sort of trimming back wild plum trees, and I actually felt hands massaging my back. I felt the fingers on my back. I felt a kiss on my cheek. It was a beautiful moment, as real as this reality. And I'm not the only person that said this about this place. I'm not going to say the name of it because I don't want it turned into some sort of ghost hunting mockery. These people feel things. They feel the petrol mower. Some of them died in fire, so they're fearful of fires. They still hold that energy. They're mortal remains that remain here. But it's a beautiful feeling, and it's only a little slight tweaking of frequency, basically. They haven't gone anywhere. They've not died. They've just surrendered that physical avatar, but they are still very much there. It's incredible. There was one day I stood in where the church was, and for a split second, a bit like when you get that, as quick as when you get that little flash of daylight, when you get lightning at night, where everything suddenly, you can suddenly see everything, all the fields and in the daytime colors. It was that quick. I saw the entire village all standing round in like a silhouette form, almost like their energy in a sort of human shape. That was beautiful. And it's like, wow. As things stand at the moment, a comment that many people say is they won't wake up. They're not hearing what I'm saying. That's because you're starting to go down that spiritual path. Your natural empathy is you want to help everybody else see the lies and things that are presented to us, but they don't hear it. with this spiritual evolution, what happens when that energy reaches the next point where it starts affecting the visual and we start to ghost out? This is why you have, I'm pretty convinced, this is why, like Jason said about these entire cities where it's like everybody's suddenly gone. Why Enoch was and he was not. Why they seem to vanish. They've moved to a different frequency because they're operating from a different vibration from their heart. So there really is nothing to fear. You will see the Phoenix event you choose to see. If you want to see an apocalypse, we'll carry on. But remember, an apocalypse is an epoch elapsed. It is an end of an era. And not before time.
It's an unveiling, and like Jason says, it's really going after the evil people, the people who are really pure at heart. They have nothing to worry about.
I agree with him that this thing it works on a protocol, and it's probably programmed to in on certain frequencies, which would be the magnetics of how we feel, and it'll probably go for negative energies. So it may work in the same way as in the human body. The gut will go for the easiest things. It will go for the sugary donuts, and it will give you the feeling of, I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore, but there's no goodness in it. And from what I can see, everything in this reality is based on human physiology. It is based on us. When you shut down a mobile phone, the screen goes black. There are still things working. It's easier if, probably the best one is if you do the reset on the phone, it seems to go dormant and then comes back to life. These avatars, when the heart stops operating and stops pacing, the body will go through a shutdown sequence of about 3 days. It's like a pre-existing program in the avatar. And this is the same with computers and things. They replicate part of what we do, but also interesting as well. When you're in a situation, the first thing that will alert you that something's not right will be your gut, which will then communicate to the heart, which will up the pace. It will set a different rhythm, because it's pacing, and it's not pulsing. It doesn't beat, but it's doing a suck bang, basically, allowing a certain amount of blood to flow, or it's letting more flow through. But when the body needs the adrenaline and it needs to go into flight mode or fight mode, depending on the situation, it's now communicating a signal. So you now feel the adrenaline, but it started with the gut. The mind is the last place to really get it, as it were. The avatar is, it's an outer covering, it's an armor that is protecting the eternal you. It's just your vehicle in this realm.
Right, and a pretty amazing vehicle too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. Like you said, we're regenerated every 18 years or 18 months or whatever it is. And yeah, just every cell knowing what it's supposed to do and doing what it's supposed to do, and taking all the abuse we give it and still being resilient. And yeah, just
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, when you think about it, when you go to sleep at night, the physical body is still running on an autopilot. You're not having to give conscious instructions to any organ of what to do. It just does. From that moment of that first cell that starts creating the heart, that will then start operating and doesn't stop operating until that sort of final moment when you surrender the avatar and give it back to Earth. You give it back to the game. Can't take it with you. I think Tutankhamun tried that one. And where's all that wealth? It doesn't matter whether the story is real or not. It's the analogy that you can take from that story. And this is the thing with everything that is being presented to us, even on the news, it doesn't matter what the source is. It is presenting something, but it's our perspective on what we see in it. That's the key part of it. Do you view that advert for just something to entertain you on television every sort of once a week, or do you see something else in it? Do you see something in the visuals in the background? Do you see something in what's written on there? The position of the way this thing's laid out and presented to you. These are all states of awareness of this reality. It's fantastic when you start seeing things from this sort of perspective, and everything becomes fantastically wonderful. There's moments where you just want to just burst into laughter. Most people look at you, you must be mad, because they're frightened of expressing, because we're taught to suppress, not to express. You're supposed to absorb everything from the external, but you're not supposed to express your authentic out into the world. And then you end up in this sort of, oh, I can't wear that. What would the neighbors say? Oh, no, I can't do that. What would they think of me? Who cares? No, doesn't matter what they think of you. That's just their opinion. It's how do you feel? That's all that matters, and not having a fear of what other people think.
And most other people aren't thinking of you anyway. Like, I know that from back in the day when I used to always worry about wearing makeup and whatever outfit, all that kind of stuff. And what a joke. No one even looks at you anyway or thinks about, how you look, etc. So yeah, it's so silly.
It's right down to the colors, whether it's horizontal stripes or vertical stripes. There's a subconscious level to all this. And then also, if you have your hair a certain way, or they're all presentations of what you want to project out to the external world. And it's pitiful, really, when I look and think, oh dear, it's like they've covered themselves with lots of falsities, unnatural things that what are they trying to present here? What do they really look like under there? What do they really look like under that avatar? What energy are they sending out? And that's where I've also learned to turn a blind mind's eye with something. It's like, that's shocking energy. I know it sounds judgmental, but you do get to get this level of perception where you feel it's a natural thing. Some people, you just get a certain feeling about them. It's not exactly judgmental. It's just the body is warning you. It's a natural protection thing, really.
Yeah, it's your intuition telling you. And intuition is truly a superpower. And we really should pay more attention to it. And it's even little things, like you're at the grocery store and you look at some product. Like, no, I don't think I need that. And then you get home and realize, oh, I did need that. Just all kinds of things, just always little clues coming in.
Yeah, it's sort of, with that sort of thing, it's weighing it up. It's like, do I really need it? If I do buy it and find out I didn't need it, is it something that I keep? So I'm going to buy it next time. So it all comes down to asking yourself questions about yourself, really, at the end of the day. It's not going to other people for the answers. I mean, I can only say, well, from my experience, this is what I find. Whether they see it or feel it in that way, that's down to them. But I can say that the perspective I have now, I feel wonderful inside. It's like, what is stress? What is all this busyness? I've got this beautiful situation that suits me at this moment, but I'm not going to worry about when will it end, because everything comes to an end at some point. You have chapters in your life, things happen, but I'm certainly not going to focus on what ifs that have no basis in any fact whatsoever unless I create them.
Right. And that's you just enjoy what you have while you have it, and, just be grateful for all the abundance and the luxuries. The,
Well,
yeah.
I could listen to what's been said about the Vatican have recalled all assets by the end of this month, and I could start really looking into that and being fearful and speculate and grow that fear. Or I can say, okay, well, it ain't happened today, so at the moment it's not a problem. How it will manifest, I really don't know, but most of these things, there always seem to be somewhere else and over there, and something I can't verify or even look at to know if it's true or not. And I'm just hearing gossip and hearsay. And even some of the big things in the news, like the next prime minister, well, how does that really affect me? It doesn't change anything in my life whatsoever. It doesn't change my experience unless I focus attention and give attention to it, and then start sort of going into that story and then taking part in that story, and then I'm going to import feelings that I don't actually want. So it's like, well, so what? It's just another character. I'm probably never going to meet this character anyway. Probably never going to see them in real life, even from a distance. So they're not even in my reality. And it's micro and macro to everything. It seems clear to me we have a projector screen called the sky that everything is projected onto, and a lot of it bounces back in a sort of a magnetic form. People will noticeably feel a different feeling when it's suddenly the sun appears from behind a cloud. Some people are affected in different ways by full moons and things. So just on those two, there is a magnetic interplay, and it follows the same pattern as a lightning strike. It comes from Earth, and we see the arcing back. It appears to be coming from above, but it actually comes from below us. So what about this other energies? I mean, this is all about reflection and reflecting upon things. So how wide do we need to reflect, and what do we need to consider as being reflected? It seems clear that with a vapor canopy, it acts as a huge, great magnifying glass, which also explains when you hear stories of what are called primitive tribes can see things like Sirius B with the naked eye that you can no longer do today. And then it's of course baffled scientists that, well, how could they see it when they didn't have telescopes and they haven't been to university and got a PhD and all this nonsense? But it's in their records. It can't be denied. They have described this Sirius B. They know it's there. They still partake in sort of ceremonies and things to do with that. So clearly the stars and the astrology have some sort of magnetic influence upon these physical avatars, but it seems to be projected from Earth. Everything comes from the heart, which is an anagram of Earth. So we've got a micro macro going on here. But what if we change the script? What if we start projecting out an energy to such an intensity that we actually start writing the story on the screen? We are the reflections, we are the star clusters, we are the star seeds is another expression. We're Pleiadians, we're Lemurians, and all this sort of thing. But there's some truth in that. We are star matter. Everything in the material realm is some sort of matter. So what if we start changing our polarity, and then if enough of us do it collectively, I mean, the stars are spaced out. They're everywhere. They're not all clustered together. You do get clusters of stars, and you get some that seem to be very far apart, but they're all having some sort of influence. So if we change our polarity and there's enough of us do it, do we not start writing our story in the heavens?
Yep, that could be the way it's done. Like you said, the whole frequency, getting at that resonance where you just go into another realm, you vibrate into another realm.
Yeah, it's like some people may sound shocked by that, and it's like, well, because I'm stretching my imagination to what is possible. That's all I'm doing. I'm saying it is possible if we use our imagination. We create it. I've already seen this for myself. I know that imagination creates reality. You see how many feathers I've got here. I must have, I don't know, a couple of hundred. But it's freely given by nature. I'm not stealing them, and I'm not pulling them and hurting the birds. They've been discarded, and I see them as a sign, and I like the look of them. I may make them into like a headdress eventually, do something with them, create something new with them. But if I had to suddenly abandon all this, it's like, well, I don't feel an attachment to them, so I can just leave them and go wherever. I don't want to be carrying heavy bags everywhere, metaphorical ones or physical ones. So I don't want much in the way of material things either. I've scaled that right down. So I've taken an active step to address. It's like, well, rather than trying to obtain more material spending power to then accumulate more material things, maybe if I change the perspective, it's like, what can I reduce? What can I cut down on? What do I not really need? So again, that's just perspectives again. And I feel richer for it. I feel so much happier for it. And I'm doing what I want to do, really, which is just spreading this message. And if I see, oh, we've got fear starting to grow there, we need to try and dispel that and transmute it and say, well, look, see it from this angle. We've got this in the UK with the sort of recent events and all the procession. This is a reconnaissance mission to test out what sort of level of patriotism is there to be exploited. Nothing is by chance or by accident. It is all very carefully calculated, almost like a artificial intelligence, I would say.
Very staged.
Yes. Well, the world is a stage, and pick the characters you want to play. Create a new one out of many characters. The sky is the limit with this one. And you don't have to be typecast as any particular character. You choose when you write your own script what you want to be. And I say to people, say, "Who are you?" And I say, "I am whatever you see me as." And then they'll ask me something like, what do you do? And they seem a bit thrown by the answer of breathe. They're looking for what job do I do so they can judge me. But I answer what they ask. What do you do? I breathe. The answers are always simple. I'm living, I'm experiencing, I'm enjoying.
You create, you breathe, and you co-create.
Yeah.
That's what you should tell them. You create your reality.
I
Tell them
did
that's what
say,
they do too. They just don't know it necessarily.
I did have a chat with, he's quite an intelligent young chap of about 15 or 16. And he said, the only way to get out of a situation is through labor. And I said, quite the opposite, actually. And I said to him, the only difference between you or I is I know who I am and I know who you are, but you don't know who you are. I said, you take out your mobile phone out your pocket and it's on standby. You basically say, in the beginning, there was a faceless void in front of you. And now you give the command of let there be light because you press the power button and you now have an image on that screen. You have done exactly the same as in Genesis. You are a copy of the creator. You have just done the same blueprint. You have created something. The thing's there, but you have activated it by pressing that power button. Same principle. And he was like really sort of shocked by that as he walked away. But we have this power. It is shown to us. And that's through a material way as well. That's the funny thing. So I don't see the same perception on good and bad as we've been programmed. I know there is the element to do with children, missing children and things. Personally, I've not really had any sort of, I have no concrete evidence, shall we say. But how do I incorporate that into my world and how is it going to affect that world inside myself? What am I supposed to do with that? I'm thinking aloud here. These are questions I'm asking myself. These are rhetorical questions, basically, because I will answer these. Well, I have the answer anyway inside, and it's like I'm staying neutral to it all. That might sound a bit heartless, but the truth will reveal itself. Things will come into the light. Now, whether it's an ambient purple light or whether it's a bright white light on a blue background, or we go to a red shift or we do a double shift of a combination of red and blue to make purple, that could be interesting.
That's what color the sky is going to be during the vapor canopy.
Yeah, I feel that anybody that decides that they want to give up their present avatar and then go round again and then comes into a new avatar after May the 16th, so we say give it a day to be on the safe side, in 2040, you'll probably find that some of your memories will be retained from previous lives. You may even get the full set back. Now, it's not whether I'm right on this, it's whether you want to risk taking the chance that isn't. I don't know the answer to that. Only every individual listener has to decide how they feel about that and whether what course they want to take through this. This is the free will coming in. You always have that. That can't be taken away. But we're put in this
Daniel,
realm.
I need to take my dogs because we're having a little break in the rain.
Oh,
But
okay.
you want to
Right.
keep talking? You want to keep talking and I'll come back, or you want to just finish the call?
Uh, how long? We've gone for about an hour, haven't we? I think. So that's
Yeah, a little
probably
over an hour.
enough in one hit, really. So
Okay.
because
Yeah,
it's
we've
like,
had rain all day today, so
yeah,
the
yeah.
dogs
Take
don't
it.
know what to do for us.
Yeah. So hopefully that has sort of put to rest some sort of fears before they get any bigger about what is
Nothing
happening.
to fear, nothing to fear
That's it. Well,
at
thank you very
all.
much. It's been an
Yeah, thank
absolute
you,
pleasure.
James. And thanks everybody for listening. And have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And always remember to focus on what you want and help others if you can. And we'll talk to you next time. Ciao, ciao.